On this Friday, it is our final day of suits and sneakers. Do you need to show yours off again?
Well, I went with the ons again.
Yeah.
Low socks, sorry, but low socks. There we go.
Yeah. Is there anything else you need to tell us about your footwear? Because the last time I felt really bad, I felt like I had cut you off, and you maybe wanted to give a longer soliloquy about.
These are great shoes to just do walking, walk the dog, not workout shoes.
No,
just comfortable shoes. Slide them on, especially for the airport.
All right. You done?
Yes.
All right. Mike DeCourcy is with us as well. As always, he is Natalie attired. Mike, do you want to tell us anything about your wardrobe, your haberdasher, anything like that, or can we just get into basketball?
I'm going to cop to the fact that because I'm at home, because this is a no-shoes household, I'm not wearing my sneakers at the moment. I will acknowledge that.
Well, and you have to respect the house rules, but you wore the suit.
Yes.
And that's the important part. Again, all in support of Coaches versus Cancer. It's been really good to partner with them here on Big Ten Network all week. But let's get into our big story. It is the action from last night in college hoop. The nation's #1 team getting it done again. Purdue 20-1 after beating Michigan in Ann Arbor 75-70. Went on a 15-0 run to take control at the end of the first half. Zach Edey, 19 points, 9 rebounds. 22nd straight game, Purdue has held an opponent to 70 or fewer points. Mike, let's break this one down a little bit. Michigan did play well. They were without Jett Howard, and of course he has been probably their second best player this year, so fair to point that out. That being said, even though Michigan put some game pressure, I felt like, on Purdue down the stretch, it never really felt like they were going to win the game in the second half. Purdue just taking care of business here.
Yeah, one of the things that I think people need to understand about a team that's having the kind of success Purdue has, you have a terrific point guard, you have a wonderful freshman shooting guard, and you have the best player in the country in Zach Edey, and that's how you get great. But how you get nearly perfect is everybody else has a part in this. And sometimes it's not a small part, and you may or may not notice it. And I thought Mason Gillis was last night's most important player beyond the obvious one. I thought he was tremendous. They went a little smaller, using Mason as much as they did. Caleb Furst, not as much Caleb Furst last night. A little more Mason Gillis to match Michigan's quickness, their perimeter ability to drive the basketball. And Mason was terrific in that department. He had a beautiful block in transition on a Joey Baker 3 that may or may not have fallen. And he hit one of the biggest shots in the game, Mason did, in a transition 3. Braden Smith set him up in transition, and he nailed it, and it took a 5-point lead back to 8 points, back to a little bit of comfort. And that's how you stay nearly perfect. They're not going to be undefeated, obviously, because they lost the Rutgers game, but they keep plugging through very difficult Big Ten games in very difficult Big Ten road environments because of players like Mason continuing to contribute along with the guys who were the focal point.
And just to pick up on that point, what we're seeing in real time is Matt Painter develop players that are all in. Trey Kaufman-Renn is, I think, a great example of that. Last night he had 8 points in 8 minutes, 4 for 4 from the field. In this transfer portal era, you could argue, I'm not getting my run, I should be getting more. Look, I'm not in his head, but it appears there's no issue here, that he's biding his time, that when Zach Edey essentially moves on, whether it's him or Sam Berg or whoever, it'll be his turn to take that next step. And that Painter has these guys like him, like Gillis, Mike is talking about, that wait their turn, their moment will come, and they're okay with that.
These are players who redshirted. I mean, Trey Kaufman-Renn redshirted last year.
That doesn't happen
it just doesn't
in today's era.
Right. I mean, a highly recruited player who redshirts, and then, as you mentioned, Andy, after his redshirt year, is willing to take a back seat to the best player in the country, arguably, in Zach Edey. I mean, I suppose it's hard to argue that, but it kind of speaks to the point that you're making as well, Mike. I think both of you are kind of making similar points, which is the pieces fit really well together. The players play the roles that they are supposed to play, and when they need guys to step up, they are ready to do that.
Yeah, I think playing a role is there's a saying in the NBA, star in your role. So not everybody is LeBron, But if you star in your role, there's a lot of money in it. And if you star in your role at Purdue, you stay atop the Big Ten race. You stay a number one seed candidate. Obviously, nothing's set in stone now. The projections we're doing are just projections. But you stay in that spot and you stay a candidate for that. And the better chance you have of being a number one seed, the better chance you have of getting to the Final Four and winning the national championship. So I don't think that there is a team in the country that's elite, that's at the top of the polls or the brackets or whatever, that doesn't have this. But it's pretty rare to get it. It's hard to get players to adopt this stance and to embrace it, and to not just embrace it, but to then go ahead and do what I said, which is to star in your role.
2 quick points. One, and I know Mike's going to talk about this later in the show, about where Purdue is in his bracket. I mean, I think that's sort of the next thing to find out. Are they the one that goes to Louisville or New York based on not having a Northeast team? You know, is it Purdue or is it Alabama? We'll see. And then with Michigan, you know, we're never going to know what Michigan would have been if they would have been healthy the whole way. They played well. Hunter Dickinson, you know, I mean, he had 21. He held his own for the most part. But this team has never been whole. They're obviously trending toward the NIT, not the NCAA. And, you know, it's disappointing, but at the same time, it is a younger roster. But we just will never know what they could have been, because I don't think they're going to ever reach their potential.
I'm going to say that I'm not sure that that's the case. There's still this stretch that they're in where they can turn the season. I think we may know in 10 days, 2 weeks, whether or not they reach their potential, but they're in a stretch of games where they can turn this season. Now, last night was an opportunity that they didn't take, but there still are more in these next 10 days or so. So I would not say that Michigan is done or faded toward the NIT yet. There's a reason why, and Dave knows this, we talked about it for years. Valentine's Day is when the bubble forms. Yeah. Everything before that isn't really, you know, we talk about it and we're usually on the money, or at least in the ballpark. But until you get to Valentine's Day, you don't really know where you are. And it happens that Michigan's schedule sets up nicely for them to make a run. Now, not having Jet or any other player might affect that. But I'm still holding out to see whether or not they can take advantage of this opportunity.
Fair enough. Yeah. But I think they're going to lose Sunday to Penn State.
Well, we shall see. But again, I did their game last Sunday, and at that point they had 9 Quad 1 games left by my count as of last Sunday. So I'm guessing it's 8 Quad 1 opportunities now. So, but they haven't won a Quad 1 game yet, as both you guys know. You're people who fill out brackets. Purdue gets Michigan
We're those
State
people
on Sunday in West Lafayette. So let's turn our attention to the Spartans. They got a really nice win against Iowa. They got Malik Hall back, which to me was the headline of this game, Mike. Not only that he came back, but that he played really well, particularly his defense on Chris Murray, which I think you could argue in some ways was the difference in the game.
He made him disappear. I think Iowa forgot that Chris Murray was on their team because of the job that Malik did on him. And maybe a little bit of that was that they were too rushed when they didn't see the opportunity happen quickly. I did think Iowa got a little bit quick in their offense, and not in the sense of running it up the floor and getting the kinds of transition baskets that Iowa typically does. But when they got into the half court, I think they didn't check long enough to make sure Chris could get open. But Malik Hall defense on Chris was the reason they did that. He was phenomenal, staying with him constantly. And if you got a chance to see the game and you saw the last possession when Iowa still had a chance, I can't remember the last. I mean, it's almost like he covered every square inch of the half-court area, the defensive half-court area for Michigan State. He went from the lane to the wing, back to the lane, and back to the wing, all to try to make sure that Iowa did not have a clean look at a basket. I thought he was phenomenal last night, and it was really interesting because prior to the game, when he was speaking to our old friend Jim Jackson, Tom Izzo said he wasn't sure how much Malik was going to play, and then he practically couldn't take him off the floor.
Yeah, I will say this. I have learned many a lesson as a sideline reporter that no more do I qualify whether or not a player is going to play with a minute restriction and all that kind of thing, because it almost never is the case. If they're in uniform, I'm going to expect they're going to be on the floor. and then play as long as they want. If go back to, I think, Mike, you were there, Champions Classic, Oscar Tshiebwe, his first game for Kentucky, that was the same thing. Oh, he's not going to play. He's not going to play. And then, he ends up playing significantly. So I've learned my lesson in that. And obviously, when he's on the floor, we know they're a different team.
Yeah, we have talked a lot about the metrics and how different they are. And certainly on the defensive end, his presence was felt, but he also scored 11 points. He threw down an unbelievable dunk, a hammer move through the lane. I mean, he looked the part. He looked ready to go.
The quick thing I will say is that you mentioned the Purdue game next. They played well against them, obviously, in East Lansing. But this is the problem with the Big Ten, the good, the bad. Just when you feel you got some momentum, we got to go to Mackey Arena.
Right. Yeah, no, it's tough. Tough one for Iowa as well. In a game they led for about 27 minutes. They had every chance. They had Peyton Sanford get 2 looks at it there, a guy who's been one of the better shooters in the Big Ten here over the last few weeks, but neither one of them went down. 3 of 17 from 3 for the Hawkeyes, and they end up falling. And now they
got
about
Rutgers.
Tough games. They've got Rutgers coming up here.
And then a hot Northwestern.
On Sunday at home. There's a new first-place team in the Big Ten in women's basketball. Number 6, Indiana, now atop the conference standings, get 9-1. They're 19-1 overall after beating number 2 Ohio State last night, 78-65. Hoosiers outscored the Buckeyes 27-6 in the third quarter. Indiana's 7th straight win. Ohio State, which started 19-0, has now lost 2 in a row. Mackenzie Holmes had 26 points in the win, which gets us to our big stat presented by Gatorade. It's Holmes' 10th conference game, scoring 25 or more in the last 13. That's now 2 more than the nearest Hoosier, Tyra Buss, her current teammate. Grace Berger has 4 such outings. The other Big Ten women's matchup in the conference last night saw 10th-ranked Maryland beat number 13 Michigan 72-64. Diamond Miller shined with 23 points and 5 steals. Terps have now won 10 of their past 11 games. Here's Big Ten Network women's basketball analyst Naz Hillman with her takeaways from last night.
My biggest takeaway from IU's win over Ohio State is how deep this team is. 4 players in double-digit scoring. And, Mackenzie Holmes, she's had to take on a big load as Grace Berger went down earlier this season, but has not shied away from the spotlight. Multiple 30 and 10-point games and had helped the team on her back in the first half of that game with 18 points. As for Maryland over Michigan, Diamond Miller has been an all-star for them, just taking over each and every game. Although she fouled out of that game, still had a huge impact for them. And their defense has been disruptive throughout this season, but especially in this game, causing 24 turnovers and scoring 25 points off of them. That makes for a team that'll make it deep in the season.
Thank you, Naz. Let's go back to the men and Mike Corsi's latest bracket. Hot off the presses this morning. He has 9 Big Ten teams in, same number as it made it the last 2 seasons. Up to 5 teams now with top 8 seeds, so the top half of the bracket, led by number 1 overall seed Purdue. Penn State is among the first 4 out. Ohio State is in the next group of 4, so legitimately 11 teams in this discussion. And then we talked about Michigan still not out of it, so perhaps 12 in total. But let's start at the top here. Mike, Purdue is your number 1 overall seed right now. How close is that? In other words, is this up in the air? Was this a tough decision? Or are they the clear-cut best team in your bracket right now?
They have been the number 1 overall seed for me for pretty much the entire time that I've been doing the bracket. We don't go preseason or anything like that. We do it after we have basically the entire non-conference season in place. Obviously, there are SEC Big 12 Challenge tomorrow, so but the full 2 months of non-conference, so we have the data that is there. And given that, Purdue was the 1 overall. Kansas, for a long time, it was almost like a 1A, 1B situation, but there was no need to discuss it because of, and I want Purdue fans to understand this. A lot of Purdue fans come at me and say, why aren't we the number 1 in the Midwest? And maybe they haven't looked at the bracket or the placements and that sort of thing. This year's South region will be played in Louisville at the KFC Yum Center. which is much closer to West Lafayette than it is to Kansas City and the Sprint Center, where the Midwest region will be played. So that's why Purdue is the number one there. As I said, when KU was right there, the Sprint Center was right there next to Kansas. So there was no need to ever really settle it. But now with Kansas dropping back a little bit and on the 2 line, Purdue is a clear number 1 overall. Alabama's a great team. And if Purdue faltered, Alabama would ascend to the 1 overall and be pretty comfortable there. But right now, Purdue is the clear 1 overall.
8 quad 1 wins for them. That is the most in the country. They have far and away the best quad 1 win percentage as well at 8-1. Let's go to the next highest Big Ten team. That is Rutgers. They are a 5 seed for the 2nd straight week. I almost feel weird asking this question because obviously they could win out and then who knows where they end up. But kind of realistically, how high do you think Rutgers can get?
I think the realistic goal for them should be to try to get to the 4 line. It's going to be very difficult. And again, they would have to dominate February in a way they haven't dominated any other month this season. They have been excellent, don't get me wrong, but they haven't been dominant. They haven't gone on the kinds of runs that would allow them to ascend past the 4 line and onto the 3 line. They obviously have an opportunity on this weekend against Iowa to win the kind of game that they kind of haven't yet. A road game against a team that's fighting for a tournament bid that has already beaten them once. I think that would be a very important win for them, and maybe the kind that would propel them to win even more regularly in the Big Ten than they do. But I think the 4 line is a good goal for them. A 4 line makes it a little bit easier to get to the Sweet 16, and they were, as we remember in the 2021 tournament, they were a few free throws away from getting there for the first time in a long while.
A team that's 7-5 against quads 1 and 2. They do have the 1 quad 3 loss. Let's go to Michigan State. They are down a spot from a week ago. What stands out to you about the Spartans' resume?
Well, I think that they have shown that they are capable of beating anybody in the country. I mean, they were as close to beating Purdue as anybody that hasn't, and as we know, the only team that has is Rutgers. So they've shown that they can do that, but they also are in reach for a lot of teams. They haven't lost a lot of tough games. They haven't lost a lot of disappointing games, I guess is the better descriptor there. They have shown that they can beat high-level opposition. And so I think that what they need to do, again, somewhat similar to Rutgers, in order to ascend and to get to a point where maybe they're a 5, somewhere around there, and that would be a big step up for them because it would mean not having to play a 2 seed perhaps in the second round. I think they just have to win more consistently, and maybe the return of Malik Hall makes that difference. Yeah. They have to be able to instead of winning 6 out of 10 really difficult Big Ten games, 7 out of 3, and then I think you're talking about maybe climbing over some of the stuff that's on the 6 line in my bracket. I have called it sort of it's sort of the sour spot on the bracket. The sweet spot is the 5 line. Everybody 5 and up is pretty accomplished. You get to that 6 line, and it's really not very impressive. So it's not that difficult to get there and go past it. But you obviously have to win more consistently. And I'm not blaming Michigan State for not doing that. It's the nature of this league. Everybody is really good. Nobody's really bad. And so it's hard to win consistently.
They got Purdue and Rutgers the next 2, so you win those and you'll move up out of that sour spot. I'm not sure I've ever heard that term, but I like it. I might have to incorporate it as my own. What about Illinois? They are pretty hot. They're up a spot from last week. Give us a sense of what you're seeing with the Illini.
Yeah, Illini fans have been on me, Dave, to recognize those 2 early wins that gave them such quality. I still think that in order to get out of the 8-9 region where they've been for most of the last several weeks, they have to be again a team that goes out and wins, and they haven't been able to quite get there. I keep looking at some of the disappointing losses that they have. And every time I want to move them beyond where they've been, I mean, the 8-9 game, I did move them up to 8 because of their success this week. And what does it mean? It really doesn't mean anything in terms of the bracket because if you're in the 8-9 game, it's the same fate. Right. But if you're on that 8 line, you're ready to move forward. And so I think they're poised to move forward. If they can succeed this weekend, I think by Tuesday, I think there's a good chance you'll see them on the 7 line.
They're at Wisconsin, big game tomorrow, really, for both of those teams. What about Indiana? They are up 3 spots this week. Help me understand that. So they beat Michigan State, which is certainly a good win. It was a game that they won at home, and then they nearly lost to a shorthanded Minnesota team on the road. Why such a big jump for IU?
I think part of it is there's a saying, one of my friends, Brian Snow, who works in the Penn State basketball operation, he says, when something happens relative to the bracket that's bad, he says it's not your fault, but it's your problem. Like if you beat Kentucky and they turn out to be instead of a number 3 seed like you were expecting, they turn out to be in a play-in game. That's not your fault, but it's your problem. Well, in this case, it's the opposite of that. Xavier's continued ascent has added a ton of weight to that Indiana road win. So couple that with their recent success, and Indiana's able to climb over some of the teams that have not been winning in that same range. Teams like Arizona State, which went up to Washington last night and was defeated, and also lost at home twice last weekend to both of the Southern California schools, who, by the way, will be Big Ten members in a few years. That's what's happening to IU. It's some of it. It's again the opposite of it's not your fault, it's your problem. So I don't know. It's not your success, but it's your good luck. Maybe I don't know what the opposite of that is, but it's everything that is working against the other teams in their same collection is working for the Indiana Hoosiers as they continue to win.
Help me understand why Northwestern isn't higher. They beat Indiana at Indiana. They've also beaten Michigan State at Michigan State. They have 4 road wins. There are only 5 power conference teams with more. They haven't lost a game outside quads 1 or 2. Why isn't Northwestern up where some of those other Big Ten teams are in the bracket?
That's a good question, Dave. And I think some of it is, I think it starts with the mental block I had on Northwestern from the beginning. It goes back to the Pitt game. And so I was very skeptical. I was probably, a little bit late to put them into my bracket. But I thought I kind of felt good about getting them away from the first 4 by getting up to a 10 seed. So maybe I should have been a little bit more aggressive with the movement of the Wildcats. They are certainly having an outstanding season. And if they continue to succeed, they'll make their second ever NCAA tournament appearance, and this one would be really quite the surprise, quite the bonus. I think that they were picked very low to start this season, and after that Pitt loss at home, Pitt, of course, is a tournament team in my field right now, but not highly ranked in the field. But they were able to recover from that and just sort of brush it off and go on about winning significant Big Ten games. Their placement in the Big Ten standings right now, really impressive. And if they continue on this road, they're going to be a tournament team again.
They will try to avoid a quad 4 loss tomorrow against Minnesota. That's the only game left on their schedule outside quads 1 and 2. So you don't want to get one of those damaging losses. Iowa has one of those at home against Eastern Illinois, as we know. Still, though, like on the court, they feel like a better team to me than where they're seated. I kind of understand maybe on paper they're not, but give me some insight into where the Hawkeyes are.
Yeah, it's a funny thing about the Hawkeyes, too, because they've played really, like you said, they look like an NCAA tournament team every time they take the floor. They haven't been one of those teams that's taken a bunch of losses in a row and then this panic sets in around the program. But when you look at the record now, and they're 12-8. Right now, 12-8 at this deep into the season, 4 games over 500, being in the field at only 4 games over 500 is an acknowledgement that we respect you as a team and we respect what you've accomplished. But you also have lost only 4 fewer times than you've won. And that does come into account what your record looks like in order to get into the tournament with an overall 1-loss record that is unattractive. You have to have some pretty overwhelming metrics or more important, pretty overwhelming achievements in terms of quad 1 or quad 2 victories. I think that's what's gotten them in. But to climb higher at 12-8 at this stage in the season, I think that's unlikely. They have to, they have Rutgers at home this weekend, and that's a huge opportunity for them to put some distance between themselves and the 500 mark, and also to get a high-end quad 1 win that the selectors will respect.
Got 3 straight games against teams in your bracket at home coming up. Rutgers, Northwestern Illinois. So we'll see whether Iowa's able to make a move.